Okay, so pardon all the hair on my floor, because you'll see why it's all there in a minute. I just want to let you guys know if there's some weird jumps in this video that you don't see as often in some of my videos, because I've got, like, how many of them are in here right now? 6? I've got 6 dogs in my bedroom with me where I'm filming this right now. Late at night. There's a 7th one downstairs. She doesn't get along with that one, so she has to sleep separate from the rest of them. But those 3 there are my dogs that you've seen in my videos before. The rest of them are my sister's dogs. She's out of town, so I'm watching them for her. And my sister's dogs do not necessarily know not to come up and talk to me when they hear me talking to my camera, like my dogs do. So I might have to cut every once in a while and tell them to go lay back down and stop interrupting my shots. Nah, they're good dogs. Anyway, I figured it was about time I talked about Amphibia again. I gushed about this show a lot back when it first dropped, and I haven't really talked about it since. I reviewed the first couple of episodes. I talked about where I felt it could have been going based on what lore it had already included within the plot. I even made a theory video about it. And I still think all those videos hold up, so I'm going to recommend that you go watch them right now. I'll link them either up there or in the end card of this video or something. But I do think you should go watch those videos, because I am going to speak in this video more or less as if you have an understanding of what I said in those. Just FYI. But for those who can't be arsed, I will say that for the most part, the things that I think hold up from those videos are the fact that this show definitely has a deep lore, and that I do think it's trying to feel like, if not a straight-up Western take on an isekai anime and another world anime, then it is borrowing heavily from that sort of story. And because I don't plan to recount any specific plot beats or go over the themes all that much, I'm making this my 2 cents video. I'm just going to ramble for a couple of minutes about how this series makes me feel and share just enough details with you to hopefully get you to watch it. Because you need to watch it. The show's already gotten a 2nd season. It's already confirmed. It's really stinking good. And I don't hear a lot of people talking about it still. I want this show to do better than it's doing. And it's already not doing super badly anyway. I want it to do great, is the point I'm trying to make. I think this is a big deal kind of show. And if we get people talking about it, specifically talking about the fact that we want a more traditional release schedule for its next season, maybe Disney will give us a more traditional release schedule for its next season. Because the reason I haven't talked about this show again since I talked about it the first time is because they aired the entire season as quickly as they physically could, and it annoyed the crap out of me. I just couldn't take the time to review every single episode as they came out. It wasn't physically possible. So practically since this series dropped, I've been planning to go back and talk about the entire first season all at once, including, at least in part, the couple of episodes that I already talked about. First of all, it's worth noting that the first half of this season-ish and the second half-ish feel like completely different shows, almost. At least at first glance, and I'll talk about that in a minute. The first half-ish of this show is filler, like true, real filler, as it's... Thank you, Kiki. As it's traditionally defined, the episodes in roughly the first half of the season are standard message show episodes, which can be framed either from the character Sprig's point of view, or from Anne's point of view, or a mix, or even from the old guy Hop Pop's point of view. And anybody can learn a lesson, and it's a really neat take on the message show dynamic, because while I will still argue that Sprig is more often than not the viewpoint character in this show, there's no real single viewpoint character in this show. And couple that with the fact that anybody can learn a lesson, it feels like all of these characters are constantly growing. This isn't like in Steven Universe, where it didn't feel like the Crystal Gems really grew as characters until we'd learned pretty much all there was to learn about their backstory. All of the characters, even the wise old elder Hop Pop, grow as characters pretty much immediately as a result of Anne's presence in this story. And I like that a lot, and I like the fact that there's a lot of conflict between Anne and Hop Pop that feels like very traditional young versus old, different generation style conflict. These people are from different ages, so they have different views on things. But they use that very traditional type of story to frame these two characters as two sides of the same coin. They're very similar people, and the narrative and the characters acknowledge that. And so when they develop, they tend to develop in parallel ways, finding a common ground, neither one of them really turning out to be more right than the other. It's really neat. And what is, I think, equally neat is the fact that because the first roughly half of the season is like traditional regular filler episodes, you can watch them in effectively any order you want without screwing up the continuity. There aren't even really any stingers at the end of the episodes like there were at the end of the first one. Now, this does mean that the lore doesn't really start to further itself until about halfway through the season, but the episodes are still super enjoyable. They're message episodes, but there's a certain amount of nuance to the messages too, more so than you see in some similar series. And while I would say that some of them are hit or miss, and you definitely don't need to watch all of them, if you do sit through all of these filler episodes, you'll understand where the characters are coming from way better when the second half of the season rolls around. Because one of the coolest things about this season is that the experiences that Anne garners living in this world, the growth that she undergoes here, and the growth that she affects in the other characters around her, once the second half of the season rolls around and it starts to have more ongoing continuity to it, all of those lessons and all of those changes, they inform the way the characters behave from that point forward. Like, each time Anne makes a decision where you can clearly see that she has to stop and think and make a decision, she has to apply her knowledge and experiences to something in order to make a decision, you can look back and say, hey, I bet she's thinking about X that happened in episode such and such. But even if you don't see that per se, if you don't read that into the second half of the season, the episodes in the second half of the season per se, you can definitely tell that by the time the second half of the season is rolled around, Anne has grown as a person. She is not the same person she was when she was first dropped into Amphibia by that magic box. And I will say this much, that even once the lore starts up again, as we start learning more about Amphibia as a place, and we get into some of the political drama and stuff that does make up the second half of the season leading up to the season finale, they don't really get into the whole magic box thing this season. They don't really revisit that much at all, except Anne does tell her adopted family about the box, and that she does think that it's what brought her here. And this is a mild spoiler, so I apologize. We do learn that Hop Pop knows more about it than he's letting on, and that's super interesting. I'm really wondering about that. I might do a theory about that. I want to say something, but it's a little bit of a spoiler, so I'm not going to say it. It's about what the box is called, and how I think it fits into my Western Isekai theory. But I'm not going to get into it here. Let's just say it's making me think a lot. I like it. There's a lot of intrigue there. There's a lot of lore intrigue. There's a lot of decent political intrigue. There's the question of where Anne's friends are, because we know that they're both here in Amphibia with her. By process of elimination, it's almost guaranteed that her third friend is here. We already know that the second person out of that trio is here as well. But by the end of the season, we don't know where either one of her friends are anymore. So at the end of the season, we're left with the question of, what is the box? Where are Anne's friends? What's Amphibia? How did Anne get here? How could she possibly get back? Why is she here? And it feels like all of those questions are going to be answered. There's not a lot of build-up here, but what we get is just so perfectly crafted that I do trust fully that we are going to find the answers to all of those questions before this series is done. And I just gotta say, after having watched this entire first season, I hate even more that this was aired on such a tight schedule, a schedule where there was no space between the episodes and we weren't given time to just sit back and think on them. Because from like a traditional season layout standpoint, the pacing of this season is just so picture perfect. We get all those filler message episodes, we see how the characters have changed, then we get to see them apply those changes to their new life together in this world that is strange to one of these characters in the second half of the season, and the character of Anne continues to learn things which build up to the finale of the season, where a bunch of stuff comes to a head and she has to make a big decision. It's all so cool. The pacing is so freaking good. And if there had actually been space between the episodes, if there had actually been time between the episodes for fans to sit back and let the revelations of the episodes, the plots of the episodes percolate, it just would have been objectively so much better than it already was. And I already think it was pretty freaking great to begin with. One thing that did disappoint me a little bit, and I will talk about this is a very minor spoiler again. I mentioned in my review of the first episode that when Anne is holding back a giant mantis monster thing in one scene to save Sprig, her eyes glow blue. That's a thing that happens. I've seen people saying that they think it's a mistake because it's never really touched on again in this first season. I disagree. It could be a mistake, but that would be a very difficult mistake for somebody to make, and then that mistake actually get through to the airing of the episode. I definitely think it was intentional, but they don't touch on it again over the course of this first season. That did bum me out a little bit. But they do, at the very least, make it clear that there is a legit supernatural element to the world of Amphibia. So if I'm right, and again, this is something from not just that theory, but I think I talked about it in that review of the first episode too, I don't remember. But it was definitely in that theory. If I'm right that when Anne and her two friends were brought to Amphibia, that they were given some special magical power to in some way affect Amphibia's future, at the very least, the fact that we have seen definitively that there is some kind of supernatural element to this world makes that possible. Like, I know the box is seemingly magical too, but that might just be that one item for all we know. You know? But even if Anne and her friends don't have some magical power passed on to them by the box, I still think they have something of an isekai superpower, which is another thing I talked about in that theory video. A thing that makes them special in this world relative to the people around them, giving them a greater potential to affect change than the average citizen here. And simply put, it's the fact that they're really freaking big compared to the other characters in this world. They're human children, and they're already bigger than all but the biggest of adults in this world. And we see right off the bat that at the very least, Anne and her friend Sasha are pretty dang good fighters too. So even without magic, they still have that isekai factor backing them. So I definitely think I'm right. I definitely think that if this is not straight up a Western take on an isekai anime, that it does borrow a lot of story elements from that, and that we can look at that to gauge where the series might go. I do think that Anne is going to end up being the savior of this world, or one of the saviors of this world, that she is going to save this world from some disaster down the line, that that's what the series is leading up to, and all of the hints to tell us that have been here since the very beginning. And how cool is that from a storytelling perspective? At the end of the day, there's nothing else I can tell you about Amphibia that isn't a bigger spoiler than the spoilers that I've already slipped so casually into this video. Everything else great about the series, you just have to experience it for yourself, and I definitely think you should. If you for some reason have not given this show a shot, you absolutely should. I know that it's hard to believe anyone whenever they say something like this, but I promise you, I'm 100% serious. This show could be the next Gravity Falls. We just need to give it the chance to flourish. It's definitely more of a slow burn than Gravity Falls was. Like, don't get me wrong, there's not going to be any fights against supernatural pyramid people this season, if you do go and watch through this first season. But all of the elements for this to be a great lore-driven mystery/action show in the same vein as that one, are already here. And it's just a well-crafted show to begin with. The animation is smooth and fluid, a lot like the quality animation that we got throughout the entirety of Star vs. the Force of Evil, even the really bad every second episode of Season 1. And while the humor in this show is definitely different than in Star vs., it is similarly funny. The humor is at least similarly fast-paced and snappy. It just feels different because it's written by different people. So, to recap, this show has really solid lore, great characters and characterization, excellent pacing, a fantastic season finale, good humor, great animation. It's overall a top-tier show, and I don't want it to get swept under the rug. I want people to watch and enjoy this, because I genuinely feel like your life will be diminished overall if you miss out on this. And now that I've got that little bit of melodrama out of the way, guys, if you have seen the first season of Amphibia, what did you think of it? Let's get a discussion going in the comment section down below, or over on my Discord, link in the description. I'm actually thinking about adding an Amphibia channel over there just to see if we can get people talking about the show a little bit more. Let me know what you think of that idea in the comment section, I guess, and I'll decide whether or not I want to do it. Either way, though, that's been my 2 cents on this topic. This has been AJ22, and I will talk to you guys later.